What's up, world? Welcome back, man. Listen, that was such a great conversation that we just had with Monica. I knew Monica wouldn't let us down. And I love where we ended with that conversation. I didn't expect we would end with lessons to be learned on greed, lessons to be learned on cases, in particular around the cases around people of color, right? And how those just don't go addressed, oftentimes in our society. And I loved how we left it with an uptick. And that's why I was excited that she went there. I didn't want to do a big spoiler alert, but I knew I had this young man waiting in the wings to come. And I couldn't think of a better conversation to be paired with Monica than to hear from someone who was running to be Manhattan's district attorney. He is no stranger to the Mike Muse show. He is back again, and we are happy to have him. Ladies and gentlemen, the candidate for Manhattan's district attorney's race, Mr. Alvin Bragg. What's happening, Alvin?
Mike Muse, always good to hear your voice. Always good to be on. Good to see you. You're looking well. I like your Just Mercy poster behind you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man, I feel like our poster and conversation is something like art, right? Like Just for All, Alvin Bragg, Just Mercy, Just Mercy. I'm a big fan of art. And so randomly, I was just having a conversation this morning, actually, about Kerry James Marshall and his paintings, and where we were talking about art. And I love art that shows Black people in leisure, right? And there's nothing much I love more than Kerry James Marshall, that portrait called Past Times, that just shows like Black people, what I appear to be on the Lake of Michigan in Chicago, just picnicking, boating, golfing, playing games. And so it's summer, and so it's art, and so I'm excited, man. What's your favorite type of art that you like? Are you abstract? Talk to me a little bit.
My favorite type of art is everyday photography.
Nice.
The photo of the kid getting his hair cut in the barber shop. The photo of kind of almost life art, right? Things that we see around the community that people kind of capture and put in a photo that we see every day, but we don't focus on. I love that kind of imagery. And then my parents both loved, and so they passed on to me. Said Ernie Barnes. They had sort of
yes
collection. I mean, that was and that had everything from The Graduate to sort of lots of different phases of life. So they enjoyed that, and I appreciate that. But I like the depictions of everyday art. Sort of the little kid on his knees looking in the train. Makes me remind me of my son when he was little, as watching the trains go by through the window. I love that kind of art.
So you're very much a human interest guy.
Yeah, I never really thought about it actually exactly that way, but it's sort of like I am, for books, I prefer a nonfiction to fiction, something that is, feels like it is actually happening, or something that is a nonfiction is actually happening. So yeah, I think very much sort of what's the story behind the art, that's a real person there, the cloud bubble above the head. So I really appreciate that kind of art, because I find our everyday lives a little bit less so this past year, we walk past that stuff. So there's things that we see, but don't stop. And so I see art that kind of forces me to stop and say, I see that every day and didn't recognize the beauty of that, the parent holding the kid's hand, he's, first time they're crossing the street or something like that. One of my favorite pictures in my house is my mom with my daughter, taking her to Sunday school for the first time, which was like my mom's joy. Like she talked about that for years as, oh, you let me take her. I was like, well, that was great for us because you took her. But like that moment we had that just captured it. And this conversation made me feel I got to be better about taking photos of my own life.
Yeah, make sure you make it happen, man. I think I had no idea where we're going to go with our conversation today, and my audience knows I never pre-plan any questions, but I think you talking about art from that capacity shows exactly why you are the type of attorney that you are and the public servant that you are, and that you are running for Manhattan District Attorney, because that is a human interest story all around. I do believe that the art that we gravitate towards has a significance in the time period of our lives, or something that we're experiencing. I remember there's a time period, Alvin, and for whatever reason, I was gravitated towards Black art, and not so much Black in terms of figures and portraits, but literally just dark colors, dark canvas. The darker the canvas, the darker the color, the better. I remember staring one day at this one portrait, this painting. It was all Black paint, Black canvas, and it was just the way that the paint was stroked and brushed. I was just mesmerized by it. And it kind of made me feel like, what's going on with me, right? And why am I so gravitating towards that? And then now I am just gravitated towards things of leisure, right? And I think I'm in this whole era of self-care right now, Alvin. Part what we just been through, but just enjoying a picnic. I've been barbecuing on my grill almost every day, just by myself, not anything, right? Just solace. So I'm enjoying self-care. So I think I'm in that space right now. That's why I'm thinking about Kerry James Marshall right now. So it jumped off the art. But you, human interest story, what is it about the district attorney that you think a human interest of having a human interest characteristic, or curiosity, that's a better way, a curiosity to human interest makes for a good district attorney?
Well, all of the cases, all of the investigations involve people's lives. And, I think sometimes that gets lost as lawyers are arguing motions and citing to cases, all of which is important. Obviously, we have a system of laws, but ultimately it's a system of and about and affecting people. And something I've encouraged the people I've worked with over the years is to look at whole people, particularly in criminal cases. We're seeing people in the most challenging moments in their lives, whether it's the victim of a crime, whether it's the person accused of a crime, and to connect them to their whole lives and to think about them as whole people. Right. I mean, and I had never made this connection before. This is why your show's so great. You're bringing it out of folks of sort of my interest in sort of arts. I'm looking at that photo of the kid in the barbershop, and I'm thinking about all the times I've sat on a Saturday morning waiting and thinking about what's going through his head. It's the same thing when we see people. You can't just see, oh, well, this was a person charged with XYZ offense, and that's the end of it. No, this is a person with a whole life, dreams, ambitions. And to tie it to your Just Mercy poster, Brian Stevenson, as he said, we can't, I'm going to paraphrase it, right, but you can't judge people by their worst moment, and so I think that your art ties exactly into sort of my view of the criminal justice system, and we can never forget that it's about people.
I love that you said that because, and we're not here to talk about judges, we're here to talk about district attorneys, but I always, and you and I talk about my nonprofit Vote Quadrant, and I always talk about the judge. You can't ask the judge questions about how they rule in the case, but you need to ask them about their lived experiences to see how they would see a young Black boy, a young Black girl, a young Black Latinx individual coming before their courtroom through their eyes. Do you think the same thing applies to district attorneys and the type of questions, right? Because we can ask you guys, questions on criminal justice or all the other criminal elements of our society. Those are fair questions for a district attorney. But we rarely think about questions to ask a district attorney about lived experiences. How much of lived experiences do you believe comes into play in a day-to-day job of a district attorney?
Oh, I know for me, it is colored, what I've chosen to do as a career, doing both civil rights law and working in the government on prosecution. It comes from, early experiences, right? As I think, and we've talked about, I had a gun pointed at me 6 times growing up, 3 by the police during unconstitutional stops, and 3 by people who weren't police. And so that framed my interest in the system. Okay, let's talk about fairness and civil rights, those 3 police stops, but let's also talk about public safety. The three gunpoint incidents not by the police, or my reentry plan about how to treat people when they return comes out of my experiences with a loved one living with me post incarceration. So I think those experiences matter for me. They give context to all that we do. And as district attorney, I want to hire people who can draw on those kind of experiences, that have a framework And I think that feeds into what we were talking about previously. If you've lived this, it's going to force you to ask certain questions. It's going to ask more probing questions of the officer about the stop. It's going to make you think about the person who's charged with an offense. Well, what's their reentry going to be like? What's the effect of this going to be on, their family? And so I think that's very important. And I want to really focus on that in who I hire and bring into the DA's office.
That's so important. You talk about the impact it's going to have on their family. I think a lot of times people don't understand, like, if a 13-year-old is coming in, is getting arrested, is being tried, right? Like, what's the impact going to be on that family? If a mother or a father is coming in and getting tried, what's the impact going to be? And particularly if that's a single parent, what's the impact of that parent getting in trouble? What's that going to do to the child, the children who's in the household? And so I think asking those questions are so key. I just did a conversation with National Geographic around the Tulsa race massacre that we experienced. And I really talked about, Alvin, the present value of wealth that was lost, right? And as a result of the present value of wealth that was lost, how that has impacted our communities going forward for generations because of that what happened. And I think people fail to realize, so I'm really glad you're bringing this human experience and human curiosity into it, because when people do enter the criminal justice system, not only is a family impacted, but a community is impacted. It up to generationally is also impacted. I want to put a pin in there, Alvin, because what I talked with Monica about was her show VH1 Anthony, and please do not comment on anything about that. But it made me think about a lot of the cold cases that go missing. And a lot of the cold cases that go missing are young children of color, young people of color, and women of color. Talk to us about, because I think we get so lost, particularly during this time period we're in, and it shouldn't be lost. The conversation needs to talk about policing and dynamics of district attorneys with policing. That is huge priority. It needs to stay. But just as district attorneys to walk and chew gum at the same time, talk to us about those areas that are not being talked about during the primaries and during the campaign season, about missing cases and cold cases, in particular when it comes to people of color, and how the human interest is important for DA to handle those. How would your office, if you're elected Manhattan District Attorney, look at that dynamic?
You reminded me of my parents a lot today. Walk and chew gum was something my dad used to say. Walk and chew gum, get them both done. But you're so right. And I would say they're inextricably tied, right? So the opposite sides of the same coin, the neighborhoods where we have the most acute police accountability issues are statistically where we have the biggest public safety challenges, right? And I think they're related. We, in order to solve crimes, we need community trust. In order to have community trust, we need to have police accountability. So they're really bound up together. But you put your finger on something that's really important. I think we spend too much time in our system on these cases. I call them the churn cases, or cases of people who low level offenses, people cycling in and out of the system that aren't necessarily making it safer. And then we look at our what we call clearance rates, meaning like how often do we solve something for homicides and other serious offenses, and they're shockingly low. And you talk about sort of human interest. You think about the families that don't have closure, right? Don't know what happened, how this came to be. And so I think clearing out and creating bandwidth to focus on these cases, both the kind of in real time ones, and also doing look backs of real harm that's happened in our communities, and focusing there. Then I think we've had misplaced focus for a while in several jurisdictions, many jurisdictions throughout the country. So I think this is a key issue, and I think, as you point out, we got to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. And hey, maybe we take a break and take a sip of water too, right?
Yeah.
Address both public safety and police accountability, because it's key to our neighborhoods. The number one civil right is to be safe, to be able to walk to your corner safely and move around your neighborhood. And you think about, going back to the human interest points, the pain of families who are living with kind of unsolved homicide, right? Or unsolved, human trafficking, right? Someone who's lost a child, they're alive, but they're swept up in this human trafficking. So really, that's where I want to focus the investment of our prosecutorial resources, which I think will help address the kind of traumas in our community that you're right, we need to be talking about side by side with police accountability.
Audience, I want you to be mindful as, I'm asking, Alvin questions about his candidacy for Manhattan District Attorney. What issues Manhattan faces is no different than the issues that, you may face where my hometown is of Lansing, Michigan, or Flint, Michigan, or Columbus, Ohio, or Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Dallas, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona. So as you guys are looking at your candidates for district attorney, these are also too how you should be thinking about these questions. And so as I'm asking Alvin questions and Alvin is answering his questions, these are things that you should be thinking about too as you are considering your district attorneys within your cities, because it's important. This is sometimes a role that goes overlooked so often. And so I think it's important that we pay attention to this. So back to Alvin, what you were talking about regarding the public safety and the ties, to the public safety. How much of a control, just for our audience, from like a class lecture 101, how much a control does a district attorney have in like cold cases, right? Opening up cold cases. How much control does a district attorney have in, the strategy and the timeline, right? And creating priority on what cases get looked at and not.
Yeah. So, ultimately the district attorney, or, called state's attorney in some jurisdictions where your listeners may be, has the authority and discretion to decide which cases get prosecuted and which ones don't. Generally that's in conjunction with the local law enforcement, the police department. Sometimes in a bigger office like Manhattan, we've got some own investigative resources for some long-term investigations, things particularly more white collar, maybe be engaged with in-house law enforcement. It's an interesting question you pose because it goes to the relationship between the police and the district attorney. So district attorney is deciding what to charge. It may be that a cold case, it may be with the police department, but a district attorney could certainly say, hey, look, I want to look at, this and put renewed focus and resources on it. So here, I'm going to have an assistant district attorney work with you side by side on that. That's certainly something that does happen, certainly within the authority and discretion of the district attorney to give priority to certain cases or certain types of cases, right? Say, look, we're looking at this human trafficking ring and how they're, dealing with, for example, let's say people, children who've run away to New York City and then are being preyed upon. So there's a live investigation on that, let's say, but that's pulled up some historical issues. So I want to look back at that and go back in history a little bit. That's certainly something within the four corners of what a DA could say he or she wants to do. It will depend, I think, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, how much they need to sort of partner with the local police department, and probably on the size of the DA's office. And as with a lot of this stuff, there's collaboration and working together in partnership.
So if you become Manhattan District Attorney, what would you do? Would that be a priority?
Well, look, so I think we have a few challenges that are right now in the moment. We're going to have a backlog of cases that from the immediate past, from COVID, with the courts not having been sort of opened up. We're going to have to address that. Then I think we need to look back in a few ways. We need to look back. We see it here with the legacy of the exonerated five in Manhattan. And I think there's some tentacles of some exonerations. We need to look back like former Brooklyn DA Ken Thompson did, looking back, make sure you get all the tentacles and make sure there are other folks, they need to look at those cases that might lead to other exonerations doing that. But then certainly also, cases where in particular, I think the way it comes up when you see sort of patterns, things that are sort of happening that harken back to a prior case, you want to try to tie that together. That's certainly something you want to do as a part of investigation. And then want to be looking at renewed technology. There could be cases that are cold, that, new forensic technology. I mean, we saw this with DNA, things that we can look back on a cold file and say, will this new technology help break this case? And then, of course, there's new human intelligence, people who come forward and say, I didn't realize the significance of this, 5 years ago, but, hey, I was on that corner and I did see this and my mind was just shocked. So certainly want to be doing that for all the reasons we talked about earlier, for the families, and for general public safety and confidence in the system, that's not solving these issues at a higher rate is one that's always going to be something that we all should be sort of questioning to figure out how we make it better.
So before I go straight, and first of all, I love the technology aspect. My audience knows I love technology. So the fact that you're invoking technology just really shows how you're thinking about transformational aspects of a office or position that seems very static, right? That needs a lot more dynamicness of resources, ways of thinking, and ways of doing it. So before we get into the piece of resistance, to keep thinking about this whole art thing, which is policing and district attorney, I want to throw you, I don't think it's a curveball, and this is something I just don't know, audience, so bear with me. I don't know if this is in the purview of district attorney, but I'm curious about this now, Alvin, just because of the whole art conversation we've been having. I've been doing a lot of deep dives into how architecture and architectural design and public space design can have a role in the impact of criminal justice reform and public safety. What is your thoughts on that? And also, two, in terms of design, using design to have an impact on public safety and design on impact on criminal justice. One, what's your thoughts on that? Two, does a district attorney have an engagement in this space? Could have an engagement in this space? Is it something you would want to do if elected Manhattan district attorney?
So, right, limited in terms of the architectural design. I think the role of district attorney allows you to sort of weigh into certain conversations, and so conversations about design of a new prison facility here as we move away from Rikers, to use the New York geography. So not something that's directly within the purview of the district attorney, but something that the district attorney, can weigh in on. I think about our own office space, and something that sort of came to mind as I was talking to a survivor of domestic violence, and she was saying just the waiting room where I was before I was interviewed, how it's situated. It was so frenetic. It was sensory overload, given what I had just been through. Or I think when I was younger, the first time I was stopped at gunpoint by the NYPD, I filed a civilian complaint. I was young, went downtown, and they put me in the smallest room to file my civilian complaint. I'll never forget it. I said, well, if this is where they put you when you file a complaint, what in the world does, jail and prison feel like? So I think we do have to be sort of conscious about the designs. I'll tell you something that a program I was recently introduced to, which is not architecture, it's a different kind of art, but a group called Music on the Inside, where they pair professional musicians with people who are incarcerated and people facing the challenges of reentry and connect through music. It's a powerful program. And so I think these connections that haven't been traditionally done are well worth exploring. And again, not all within the direct four corners of the DA's office, but I think lifting them up as things that promote fairness and public safety are certainly part of what I view the DA's role to be.
I think even how you talk about the design of the offices, the waiting room, the complaint offices, those are all about your constitution of human interest and dignifying humans, right? And as you referenced Brian Stevens, and then paraphrasing of saying, just because one instance doesn't negate them from anything else of who they may be. And so, damn it, Alvin, pause it right there. I gotta tell you that's my, hold on. We're gonna edit this part out. I haven't had that package rescheduled 2 times. And so with that being said, when you talk about just because that person made that mistake that one time, right, doesn't necessarily reflect who that person is as a human overall. And so I think looking at it, the design aspect of that area really shows the dignity, I think, that you're looking to bring to the district attorney's office, right? And that lived experience and how we're all humans first. as we wrap, and I hate to end it with the most controversial, heaviest of topics and subjects to answer, but I think it was just important just to demonstrate how much of a district attorney is involved in the city's office. Manhattan, district attorney, Manhattan, and also too many cities across the country are dealing with difficult times with policing, with community. New York in particular is dealing with a difficult time of policing community. If you were to be elected district attorney, you're going to come into a space where there's a large narrative to defund the police. We don't know which mayor is going to be elected, and the mayors that are in contention right now, they all have a different thought process about policing and funding and social work. You have a police force that really isn't happy with this current mayor. There are some challenges there within that space. You don't have to weigh in on that. So you would be coming into a very difficult dynamic. What would be your approach in terms of, as district attorney, the tone you would want to set in both working with police, but making sure the community is represented when it comes to police encounters with our community, in particular communities of color?
So I always think the best way to approach something is to talk about what you've done, right? Particularly if someone's seeking office, not what I will do in a vacuum, but what I have done. So this is really the story of my life, going back to those 6 gunpoint incidents, right? And a public safety and fairness being bound together. And so for me, when I talk to the community and law enforcement, I said, look, I've done both, right? I have my first significant case out of law school was suing the state police for excessive force, for breaking up a peaceful protest. This was, years and years ago. Prosecuted an FBI agent for lying. You mentioned the mayor. I'm currently suing the mayor, representing Eric Garner's mother, so seeking transparency around his death. So, but people say, well, how can you do that and run for DA at the same time? So because that promotes fairness. We as the public deserve to know what happened. What happened with the medical care? Who were all the police officers who were there? Were they disciplined? There was a police officer who was there, went back to the precinct and filled out a police form and said that no force was used in arresting Mr. Garner. Well, we've seen the video. Why has there been no discipline? So I think asking these questions and combining fairness and public safety are really, really important. And what I say to my law enforcement partners is, look, this ultimately is about public safety. If you don't have the trust of the community, you can't do your work. Victims won't come forward, witnesses won't come forward. For people to work with this system, they've got to have some trust in it. And so this is ultimately public safety work. That's a conversation I've had lots of time. It's a challenging conversation sometimes, but I think starting from that place and talking about it. And you're right. I think the things our police officers should not be doing. My late father ran homeless shelters. I don't think we should have police doing homeless sweeps. My mom was an educator. I think we need more teachers in schools and not militarized police force. But when I say that, I also add that there's work that we need police officers to do. I mean, I prosecuted a case with a business person who was laundering millions of dollars of drug money for a violent cartel. Cartel was literally beheading people. My late mother and father could do a lot, and that's kind of my drawing line. If it's something they could do, then we don't need the police for it, right? Education, homeless, social services. But they weren't going to go run after the group that was beheading people. That's where we need our police. And I think we need to say that, right? Say what we don't want you to do, and then say what we want you to do. And what I found is that I haven't found the officer who went to the police academy to do the homeless sweep, right? They are wanting to do things that bring enduring public safety. So I think having that conversation sort of in the full-bodied way, like the way we talk around the kitchen table, the way we talk in the barbershop, to go back to the photo I like of the, it is the real talk, that we can have both. We have to have both, and talking about it in the same breath. And I think that one focuses on the community's urgent need for accountability and reform, but pairs it doesn't separate it, pairs it with the public safety that we deserve, and talks about the role of police in helping with that, the proper role. And so that's what I've been doing the last 20 plus years. And I look forward to, having that conversation, hopefully come June 22nd, as hopefully, well, June 22nd is the primary, then November is the general, as the Manhattan District Attorney.
Alvin Bragg, thank you for your time today. Thank you for bringing in the experience of your past that will indicate how you perform if you were to be elected into this role of Manhattan District Attorney. How can people reach out to you? They want to learn more about your campaign.
Thank you, Mike. AlvinBragg.com, ALVIN. I guess it's on the poster right behind me. ALVINBRAGG.com. We have our policies, our endorsers, including most recently the New York Times, listed on our website. And then if you're a social media person, and if you follow Mike, I know you're on social media at Alvin Bragg NYC on all the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thank you so much, Mike. It's always good. You make me think about things that I hadn't thought about art. Certainly in the last year, I've been focused on, directly on criminal justice but you're right to tie it in and human interest. That's what I want to take away from it. Human interest.
Yeah.
That I think you said something which should be a slogan. You said humans first.
Yes, that's what we should look at. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Alvin Bragg. Alvin, we wish you luck on your bid to become Manhattan District Attorney. Audience, we have had a great show today. Monica, I just can't even believe it. My crush. And what a way that she made us think differently about life and humans. And Alvin came through and hit it right out the park. So until next time, folks, enjoy a little bit of Monica on the way out. Peace.